Welcome to Blue Iron IP's Patent Myth podcast. I'm Russ Krajak, your host, and the author of Investing in Patents, as well as a soon-to-be-released book called Startup IP Strategy. Blue Iron provides financing for patents, so we look at startup companies and their assets, the patent assets, as having value and trying to figure out how do we create value with those assets. Our view is that 95% of all the patents out there are worthless, and the percentage might even be higher for startup companies. Our aim is to take down some of those existing patent myths and put in better practices so that startups could do a much better job with their IP. There is a myth that your patent attorney is your friend, that your patent attorney is in your corner, that he's doing the right thing for you. We're going to explore that a little bit here. So we're going to talk about the patent myth that your patent attorney is your friend. He's not, okay? So there was a guy back in 1989, his name is Stephen Byrne, and he was a landscaper. He invented an attachment for a string trimmer that he would use for edging a walk. And what it was is a cone that kind of attached to the spinning area of the string trimmer, and it held the string in a very straight, a straight way, so you can just go down the edge of a curb or whatever and trim the area nice and square. So he goes to a patent attorney, he gets a patent. And then the patent attorney and the inventor call up Black & Decker and want to do a license agreement. And Black & Decker look at the patent application, or they look at the issued patent, I should say, and they figure out a way to design around the claims. So and here's the devil's in the details with all of these, but the patent attorney described this cone as having a planar surface, which is where the string would rub against. And the term planar was really important here. Black & Decker looked at that, and Black & Decker's, a pretty smart company. Their patent attorneys look at it and they had a twinkle in their eye and they said, you know what, we do not need this license agreement. And so after that negotiation fell through, next thing you know, Black & Decker's got the product on the market. And what Black & Decker did is, instead of having a planar surface where the string would rub against, they did something else. I don't know if they had a half moon or an angled piece or whatever, but they did not do a planar surface. They did some kind of conical or, toroid or whatever you want to call that. And they brought the product to market. Well, what did Mr. Byrne do? Well, he's angry. He thought he was going to get rich off this licensing deal, and Black & Decker's a big company. They make, they would have paid him gazillions of dollars and he would have retired and he wouldn't have to mow lawns anymore. Well, he's still mowing lawns because he's paying his patent attorney. He went through the patent process. This cost him some money. Went through the licensing process. He's into him a little deeper there. So Mr. Byrne lights up a patent infringement lawsuit against Black & Decker. He sues Black & Decker. You guys came over. We sat around the conference table. You looked at my invention. You looked at the patent. And lo and behold, you came out with the same exact product a little while later. And in that, and Mr. Byrne loses the patent infringement lawsuit. And this is the first time that Mr. Byrne realizes that the patent is not very good. That one little saying, that one phrase of a planar surface is what killed, it killed the patent, because somebody was able to design around the planar surface. Okay, and this is how we invalidate patents, or this is how we improve on inventions, if you want to call that. But this is also how we figure out if a patent has much value. You look at every single word in the claim and you say, well, how could I do this differently? And how can I, this requires a flat surface. You know what? What if it's not flat? What if I just angle it? Now it's a conical surface instead of a planar surface. Or what if I do something else? Whatever it was, Black & Decker was able to get around the patent. They were able to design around this guy's claims. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that Mr. Byrne turned to his patent attorney when they lost this lawsuit and said, "You're at fault. You're the patent attorney. You should have and would have, but for your incompetence and your ineptitude, you committed malpractice. I asked for a good, licensable patent. You knew that. You knew that I was coming in here. I was the landscaper. I don't know anything about patent law. Your job is to guide me through this. Your job is to get me a patent that's good enough that I can license it." And Mr. Byrne takes his attorney to court and sues the attorney for malpractice, basically saying, "You should have got me a patent that was good. Instead, you got me a patent that was bad." Well, what happens? Mr. Byrne, no, poor guy, no good luck for him. He loses the lawsuit for his, when he sued his attorney too. And it turns out in that lawsuit that the duty of care for the attorney is to make sure we get a patent. The duty of care for the attorney is not to make sure we get a good patent. What if you want a good patent or a bad patent? If you want a good patent, that's on the client to manage. As long as the patent examiner says that this was a good invention, patent attorney did his job. Okay, even though it's not licensable, even though it's easy to design around, even though the attorney knew that our landscaper friend was betting a lot of money, betting a lot of it, a lot of his, savings and retirement went into this thing. He put a lot on the line, and he was really, he may have been over leveraged on this thing. The attorney still knew all that, but the attorney got him claims that were easy to design around, at least easy in hindsight. But the rule of law is that the attorney is not responsible for getting a good patent. And, maybe that makes sense because, most of these patents, 95 to 97% of them are worthless. And who's going to, who are you going to sue? Well, we don't want to have to, with that terrible success rate, you don't want them all going back to the patent attorneys and running them out of business. Well, I'll tell you my experience was, I had this invention. I've mentioned it in a couple other podcasts of a sawhorse bracket. Well, I had not been through the patent process as an owner, or an inventor of a patent. I had only done it as, sitting in the corporate environment. And so this is the first time that and I wanted to learn about the patent system and my question was, how do I create an asset that I can license? And what do I need to do for that? And how am I going to be successful for that? Well, one of the patent attorneys that I knew was on my hockey team. And I didn't know any other, well, maybe I knew a couple, but this guy was on my hockey team. So I give him a call and I'm like, hey, I want to see you about this invention. And a couple things happen. One is we sit down and we chit chat for, about hockey, and we talk about this, we talk about that, maybe skiing or whatever. We chit chat for half an hour, 45 minutes. And then I was like, okay, let's just help me out here. I got this invention, and what do I do with it? You tell me. You help me out here. And he's like, well, you could get a provisional. You could do a provisional patent. You could do a non-provisional. Some people do searches. Searches are interesting. I'm like, well, what do I do? What's kind of the best way? I want to make this really solid so that I can license it. My goal here is to license it. He's, well, some people do searches. I mean, searches are pretty interesting. I'm like, well, should I do that? What's your advice? Well, I can't really advise you, but here's all your options. And he kind of, he take another 15, 20 minutes to lay them all out again. And I'm like, well, okay, let's do a search. I just kind of picked it because I didn't know any different. And so he's like, okay, we'll do a search, and boom. So I get a bill for $2,500 for the search, $2,500. And I read the patent, all the patents that they cited, the references. I read all those. I'm like, you completely missed the invention. The invention was that the legs were kind of angled over this way and not that way. And you completely missed that. And he was like, oh, well, I'm kind of sorry about that. But, he never said I'm sorry. He's like, well, okay, do you want me to do it again? I'm like, darn right I want you to do it again. This is terrible. You got to fix that. Well, he did a second one, and a second invoice came for $2,500. And I am just furious. Okay. I'm just absolutely I'm angry over that. And so I'm like, okay, you know what? I learned from this. I paid the bill. I paid $5,000. And I was so angry about that interaction was the impetus for me to go take the patent bar and become a patent agent. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to figure out how to do this, and I'm doing it differently from this guy. So I took the patent bar, I passed it, and I wound up working for that attorney. I worked for him for about 3 years, and I learned what happened on the inside. And on the inside, it's much, much different. I still had that experience with him on the outside and, getting hosed for $5,000. I still had that, over my head, and I was very, very conscious of that. I knew he was a crook, and so my job was to learn as much as I possibly can about how this worked, about how the system worked. I wanted to know everything about it. Everything from how do you do file naming, how do you docket the things, to file naming conventions, to how you engage clients and what you send them. And, I just billing and invoice. I wanted to learn everything I possibly could. And, the basic rule for the law firm was that independent inventors were known as one thing. They were known as a walking malpractice suit. They're never going to be successful. Okay, statistically speaking, okay. They're unlikely to be successful. And yet who is going to be hanging around still bugging them to give them money? Well, it's the patent attorney, because it's going to be, 3, 4, 5 years later, we're still prosecuting the patent. They're still paying them. And, the guy's dead broke. What's he going to do? Well, he's going to, hey, you would have, should have, could have done this for me. And, they extract some money out from a malpractice suit. Our job was never to guide the client. Kind of. But our job was to lay out every single option in excruciating detail at $400 an hour. We could go through that stuff really, really, really slowly. And the attorney was really good at that. All that talk when I first visited him and we spent 45 minutes talking about hockey, that was on my bill. I had to pay for that. That was $300 out of that $400 first hour consultation. But any event, when I was inside, we were absolutely instructed, you do not tell them the answer and you let the client decide. You hand them the document and they review it and they sign off on it. So if those claims, Mr. Byrne probably in his string trimmer, invention, probably got the patent application from the client, from the attorney, and looked at it and said, well, I have no idea what any of this means or how to judge it or tell if it's good or bad or whatever. But he, at that instant, is responsible for knowing whether it's good or bad. He's the last decision maker. He's the only decision maker that says this is good or bad. And what does he do? Well, he has to, because he doesn't know any better, he has to defer to the attorney. And the attorney essentially has a conflict of interest with their client in that regard. The attorney, have you ever been to attorney and have them say, no, I don't really think we need to do this? No, you're always asking the barber if you need a haircut. And, the attorney needs to sell hours or needs to sell patents or whatever that's their stock in trade. And, people don't come on the lot unless they want to buy. So if somebody's asking, should I get a patent? Every patent attorney in the room has to stand up and say yes. And part of the reason is this malpractice exposure that they have. If they give advice, and none of them do, but if they did, what's their liability exposure? It's not a few $1,000s for filing fees or attorney's fees or whatever. If the patent attorney fails to get a patent when he woulda, coulda, shoulda got a patent for the client, if he fails in any way to do that, he does not get sued for a few $1,000s. The attorney gets sued for all your lost profits in every country of the world for the next 20 years. I mean, that could literally be billions of dollars if, all this woulda, coulda, shoulda happened and you convince a judge that, but for that patent, we, would have been really successful in licensing this to, every cell phone on the face of the planet or whatever. And, that liability exposure is so enormous that the attorneys just back off of any kind of advice at all. And turns out, even if they did give advice, the only thing they're responsible for is getting it through the patent office. So how do big companies deal with it? Well, the way they deal with it is they have in-house patent counsel and they have outside patent counsel. I used to do a bunch of work as outside patent counsel for Microsoft, but the in-house patent counsel were actually responsible for getting good patents. They would vet the ideas. They'd say, we want patents on this technology and this technology. And they were the ones that were responsible for my work product. My work product was, hey, here's what I think the invention is going to be. Here's some claims. Go on, we're moving forward with this. And they were the ones that really had to take that, whatever I got allowed or whatever I was working on and put it into a business context, license it out to a competitor or do whatever. And they were very, very sophisticated. But part of it was that they all grew up writing patents on the outside, so they knew all the tricks of the trade. And now they're in-house, where they get to boss around the people that used to boss them around, their old bosses. And but their view on that was a lot different. And same thing when I did a startup company out in Seattle, we wrote 100 patent applications in 2 years. And I would look at those patents not as, hey, here's a bunch of billable hours or, money that I can get, because I was in-house and I was working for equity and all that kind of stuff. What I cared about was who's going to buy this asset. Who is the target for the company is going to buy it? And what do they look for? What value do they put on it? How do they like their patents written? What do they want them to look like? How do they like their figures done? Like everything I could possibly think of to put in that patent that would drive a sale. Obviously, all the formal things, how they want it to look and sound and all that is, one element of it. But a bigger element of it is really good claims that are directed at the right infringers in the same style and manner that they did. And, our target was Microsoft, and Microsoft eventually bought all the patents from the startup. And, but I was designing those assets with a target in mind when I was in-house. And that's just something that is forbidden from a malpractice standpoint from doing on the outside. I was never allowed to do that when I worked at that law firm because, whoa, we do not want to take on that kind of responsibility. So we just completely avoided doing that. And we would often leave clients hanging where we would know, well, I should say, this is when I was working at the law firm, I would know the right answer for the company. And I was not allowed to tell them because I'm not allowed to take on that responsibility. And at the same time, if I told somebody, no, I don't want to do your invention, well, that's really taking food off my table. I kind of need to keep doing that stuff. Whether I like it or not, it's just putting food on the table and the client's willing to pay for it. So who am I to say if it's good or bad? And that frame of mind that I don't know, it's so disturbing to me that attorneys and I was, that's part of the environment where I learned the trade. I hated that so much, and I saw startups making bad decisions all the way through. It was really frustrating to me. And that's where I kind of started developing, well, I shouldn't say kind of, that is where I started developing this business of financing patents for startups. And when I finance a patent for a startup, I have complete freedom to really make those assets good. And the legal structure for that is I do the patents on a leaseback model. So the patents go in a holding company, and I have an attorney-client relationship with the holding company, but not with the startup. And really what that does is, instead of put us at odds, it actually aligns our interests. Now, if I'm representing the quality of the patents, if all I want is good patents out of this company, I need to work with the startup, because the patents that I'm writing need to parallel the products they're putting in the market. The things that they're learning from their customers, from the manufacturing product, whatever, that needs to be rolled back into the patents that we do, the follow-on patents and so on. I need to be really in sync with that startup. And you know what? I need that startup to be successful. Okay? It's not about just collecting fees down the road. I need them to prove that this invention is good. And the way you prove the invention is good is that you make the product and you sell it. And the only proof of goodness for a patent is that somebody's buying a product that includes that invention. And the next layer of goodness is that when an infringer comes along and they pay a license fee because that invention is so good that they don't want to design around, then we have a super, super valuable patent. But finding those patents, finding those ideas takes a ton of work and a ton of due diligence. A lot of companies that I look at for financing, I can't get I need to be convinced that those patents are going to be valuable. And a lot of times they're not. And so I'll tell them, look, I don't want to be a yet another solution, another Me Too solution to some existing problem where the patent really doesn't add any value. Your product might, okay? Your product might be great and you can sell it and you compete against all these other people. But if it's competing because of marketing or branding, or, you have a better color palette or whatever, that's great. But I only want to do patents on the companies where the IP makes a difference. And if I go through the due diligence process and say, you know what, I'm going to make an investment in this company because I believe in the IP, then you know that I have skin in the game and I've got money on the table. I'm financially tied to the success of the patent and the success of the company. And that's really the reason why I do this patent financing thing, and why it's a little unique. And sometimes people don't understand it or whatever, but that's because it's not widely done, because the attorneys don't want to take the risk. And I'm willing to step into that place and take the risk because I trust what my judgment and my ability to assess, whether that risk is valid or not. So in any event, I look forward to any comments or feedback, or if you have suggestions for other episodes or whatever, please feel free to ping me. Thanks again for listening. Well, thanks for listening. I'm Russ Krajak, CEO of Blue Iron IP. We're a patent finance company where we'll make 50 to 100K investments in startup companies to get them decent patent portfolios. And then we'll do loans against patents at $2 to $5 million for later stage companies that have some revenue. You can find me at blueironip.com. You can pick up my book, Investing in Patents, available on Amazon. We're always looking for new deals to finance and syndication partners with angel or venture firms. And please feel free to get in touch with me. And I look forward to chatting with you.